Sophie Morgan stared at the envelope in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the return address from the medical laboratory. She had just turned 18 last week, and this was her own personal rebellion, a secret she'd kept from both her parents. The paternity test results that might confirm what she had suspected for years. The apartment was quiet. Her mother wouldn't be home from her shift at the hospital for another 3 hours. Sophie had timed this deliberately, needing privacy for whatever revelation awaited inside the crisp, white envelope. "Just open it," she whispered to herself, sliding her finger under the sealed flap. 3 weeks earlier, Sophie had found the documents while searching for her birth certificate in her mother's home office. Tucked away in a faded manila folder labeled "Sophie Important" were legal papers she'd never seen before. Paternity acknowledgement forms listing Marcus Wright as her biological father, the man who had raised her, the man she called Dad. But paperclipped to these were medical records with a different name, James Harrison, and an old photograph of her mother, Rebecca, sitting closely beside a handsome stranger with familiar hazel eyes, Sophie's eyes. She'd spent her entire life believing Marcus was her father. He had coached her soccer teams, taught her to drive, and promised to help pay for her college education. Their relationship wasn't perfect. He worked too much and struggled to express emotions, but Sophie had never questioned her parentage. Not until she found those hidden files. The DNA test had been surprisingly easy to arrange. A cheek swab from herself, another secretly taken from Marcus's electric toothbrush while he was showering, and a hefty fee from her savings account for expedited results. Sophie unfolded the paper now, her eyes scanning quickly past the scientific terminology until she found what she was looking for. Probability of paternity? 0%. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Marcus Wright was not her biological father. Sophie sank onto her bed, the paper clutched in her fist. 18 years of her life suddenly felt like an elaborate fiction. Her mother had lied, not just once on a form, but every single day, maintaining the charade that Marcus was Sophie's father. Had he known? Was he complicit in the deception? She heard the front door open unexpectedly. Her mother's voice called out, "Sophie? I got off early today. Are you home?" Sophie hastily shoved the test results under her pillow, heart racing. She wasn't ready for this confrontation, not yet. She needed time to process what she'd discovered, time to figure out what to do with this explosive information. "Coming, Mom," she called back, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears. As Sophie walked down the hallway toward her mother, the woman who had orchestrated this lifelong deception, she realized that the truth was a double-edged sword. It could cut through lies, yes, but it could also sever relationships beyond repair. Her mother smiled warmly when Sophie entered the kitchen, completely unaware that her carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. "How was your day, sweetheart?" Rebecca asked, unpacking groceries. Sophie took a deep breath. "Fine," she lied, buying herself time to formulate a plan. "Just fine." For the next 3 days, Sophie maintained her facade of normalcy. She went to school, worked her part-time job at the local bookstore, and made small talk with her mother over dinner. But inside, she was churning with questions and resentment. Each night, she pulled out the test results from beneath her mattress where she'd hidden them, staring at the clinical evidence of her mother's betrayal. On the 4th day, Sophie decided to skip her afternoon classes. Instead, she headed to the public library, determined to find information about the mysterious James Harrison. The name had haunted her thoughts since discovering it in those hidden documents. It took her less than an hour to find him online. James Harrison, age 43, worked as an architect at a prestigious firm in Hartford, just a 2-hour drive away. His company website featured a professional photo, the same strong jawline, the same hazel eyes that Sophie saw every morning in her mirror. She printed the page with trembling hands. While scanning through social media, Sophie discovered more. James was married with 2 young children, a boy and a girl who looked to be elementary school age. His wife, Natalie, appeared in numerous photos, always smiling, her arm wrapped around James's waist. They seemed happy, complete. Did he know about Sophie? Had he abandoned her before birth, leaving her mother to forge documents naming Marcus as the father? "Can I help you find something?" The librarian's voice startled Sophie, and she quickly minimized the browser window. "No, thank you. I'm just finishing up." That evening, Sophie sat at the dinner table across from Marcus and Rebecca, studying their faces with new awareness. Marcus had begun balding in his early 30s, his remaining brown hair now streaked with gray. Nothing like her thick, wavy chestnut hair. His eyes were deep blue, not hazel like hers. How had she never questioned these differences? "Everything okay, kiddo?" "You've barely touched your food," Marcus said, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. Sophie swallowed hard. "I'm fine. Just thinking about a school project." Rebecca tilted her head, studying her daughter. "Which class?" "Biology," Sophie answered, the irony not lost on her. "We're learning about genetic traits." A flicker of something, was it alarm, crossed her mother's face. "How interesting," Rebecca said, too casually. "Like eye color and such?" "Exactly like that," Sophie replied, holding her mother's gaze until Rebecca looked away first. After dinner, Sophie retreated to her room, her resolve hardening. She needed answers, and she would get them, not from her mother, who had proven herself a masterful liar, but from the source, James Harrison himself. The next morning, Sophie called in sick to school. After her parents left for work, she packed a small bag, withdrew $300 from her college savings account, and boarded a bus to Hartford. The journey gave her time to rehearse what she might say to the man who had unknowingly contributed half her DNA. By early afternoon, Sophie stood across the street from the glass-fronted building housing Harrison Architectural Design. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain pedestrians could hear it. What if he refused to see her? What if he knew about her and had chosen to stay away? Worse still, what if he had no idea she existed? Sophie clutched the strap of her bag, frozen on the sidewalk. Just then, the building's revolving door spun, and a man in a tailored suit emerged. The man from the photographs, her biological father. He was taller than she'd imagined, his stride confident as he checked his watch and headed toward the parking garage. Before she could second-guess herself, Sophie called out, "Mr. Harrison?" James turned, his expression puzzled but polite. "Yes?" "My name is Sophie Morgan," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I think you might be my father." James Harrison's expression shifted from confusion to shock as he studied Sophie's face. For several long seconds he stood motionless on the sidewalk, briefcase hanging limply from his fingers. "Sophie," he finally said, her name sounding strange in his voice. "Rebecca's daughter." The confirmation hit Sophie like a physical blow. He knew her mother. He knew her name. "You know who I am?" James glanced around, suddenly aware they were standing on a busy street. "We should talk somewhere private. There's a coffee shop around the corner." They walked in uncomfortable silence, Sophie's mind racing with questions. Inside the quiet cafe, James chose a secluded booth in the back. After ordering 2 coffees, he folded his hands on the table and took a deep breath. "I never thought this day would come," he said quietly. "How did you find me?" Sophie pulled out the DNA test results and placed them on the table. "I found some documents at home. Mom had papers listing Marcus as my father, but there were medical records with your name too. I did a paternity test with Marcus without him knowing." She paused, fighting back tears. "He's not my biological father." James closed his eyes briefly. "No, he's not. "Did you know about me all along?" Sophie demanded, her voice cracking. "Yes," James admitted. "I've known since before you were born." Sophie felt betrayed all over again. "And you never wanted to meet me? Never cared enough to be part of my life? That's not—" James stopped, reconsidering his words. "It's complicated, Sophie. Your mother and we worked together at the hospital. I was completing my architectural internship, designing their new wing. Rebecca was a young nurse. We had a brief relationship, and when it ended, she told me she was pregnant." "And you just walked away?" Sophie's voice rose slightly, causing a nearby patron to glance over. James leaned forward, his expression pained. "I wanted to be involved. I told Rebecca I would support you both financially and be part of your life. But she was already seeing Marcus, and they were getting serious. She told me they were planning to get married, and Marcus wanted to raise you as his own." Sophie shook her head in disbelief. "So you just agreed to that? To pretending I didn't exist? I was 25, just starting my career. Rebecca convinced me it would be better for you to have a stable family with two parents who were committed to each other. She said Marcus loved her enough to accept her pregnancy and raise you as his child." James ran a hand through his hair. "I agreed to sign away my rights, but I made her promise she would tell you the truth when you were old enough to understand." "Well, she didn't," Sophie said bitterly. "She faked documents listing Marcus as my father. My whole life has been a lie." "I'm sorry," James said, his voice genuine. "About 5 years ago, I contacted Rebecca to ask if she'd told you yet. She said Marcus had legally adopted you, and telling you would only hurt everyone involved. She begged me to stay away." "And what about now?" Sophie asked. "You have a new family. Do they know about me?" James looked down at his untouched coffee. "My wife knows. I told her before we got married. But my children are still young, 7 and 9. We were waiting until they were older to explain." Sophie sat back, emotionally exhausted. "I don't know what I expected from coming here. Answers, I guess. But now I just have more questions." She looked directly at James. "Does Marcus know? Has he known all along?" James hesitated. "That's something you need to ask your mother." By the time Sophie arrived home, darkness had fallen. She found her mother sitting alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by old photographs and documents, the same hidden files Sophie had discovered weeks earlier. "Marcus called from work," Rebecca said without looking up. "He said Hartford showed up on the location tracking app for your phone. He was worried." She finally raised her eyes to meet Sophie's. "James texted me after you left him. He told me everything." Sophie dropped her bag on the floor. "No, Mom. You need to tell me everything. No more lies." Rebecca nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "You're right. It's time." She pushed a chair out for Sophie. "Marcus will be home in an hour. We'll all talk then." "Does he know?" Sophie asked the question that had been tormenting her. "Has he always known I'm not his biological daughter?" Rebecca reached across the table and took Sophie's hand. "Yes," she said softly. "He's always known. And he chose to be your father anyway. Every single day for 18 years. Sophie pulled her hand away, still hurt but beginning to understand the complexity of her parents' choices. "I need to hear the whole story, from both of you." "You will," Rebecca promised. "No more secrets." As Sophie sat across from her mother, waiting for the man who had raised her to come home, she realized that family wasn't defined solely by DNA or legal documents. It was created through years of small moments, soccer games and driving lessons, arguments and reconciliations, love given freely with no biological obligation. The truth had been hidden in falsified documents, but perhaps the most important truth had been there all along, written not on paper, but in the story of their lives together. Sophie didn't know if she could forgive the deception yet, but for the first time since opening that envelope, She felt ready to listen.
Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more interesting content coming soon.